Hi, I'm Sonia of Sonia Showalter Designs. Think of me as your embroidery therapist. Today, I'm going to take the fear out of making freestanding lace. You're going to find out how fun and how simple it can really be. Are you ready? Let's get started. Here's the first one I want to show you. This one is probably most popularly known as Badge Master. It looks just like plastic, it feels like plastic, it's pretty strong. And this was originally, I think, from my experience, I think it was the only one available for a long time. We had no other choice for a water-soluble stabilizer to stitch lace on. This was great while that's all we had. However, the problem with this is that the needle is actually punching holes in it as it stitches. Every hole is going to be stretched and pulled, and eventually it can cause distortion of your lace, which can be a factor when it comes to the final quality, because when you stitch lace, the most important thing is for the design to stay exactly where it's supposed to stay until every stitch has been formed. If part of the lace implodes and then it comes around and does a satin edge to finish off, it might miss some of that edge. The lace won't hold together properly, or it might have spots that held together but other spots that didn't. So it's almost a hit and miss if your stabilizer does not stay in place during the stitch out. And that's one of the drawbacks of this particular stabilizer. Now this can be great stabilizer for some people. I don't use this anymore, so I don't test with it. And I always suggest use whatever the digitizer has suggested for stabilization, because that is what that digitizer has used for testing. So this might work all right for another designer, but I don't recommend it for my designs. Now there's another type that is water soluble that looks like plastic. It's like saran wrap thin, the plastic film that you use to cover your food with. It's that thin. And I've known this as Solvy, and it probably comes under a lot of other names, but this is not used to stitch your lace on, ever. Because if this one, which is heavy and very strong, will not hold up properly under all those stitches, this one that is very fine and thin and stretchy is going to hold up that much less. So this is not what you stitch your lace on. This is used for stitching a regular embroidery design on, let's say, a t-shirt. It helps to define your edge and make it prettier. It gives you a much better quality edge around your design. It helps to keep the fabric in place. With stretchy fabrics like knit, you want something a little more solid that the stitch can form around. And that's what this is used for. And then it just simply tears off at the edges where the stitch, you just gently tear it off, no problem. It's also good when you're stitching on towels. It holds that towel nap down, and it also helps to define those edges and just give you a much, much nicer quality embroidery in the end. That's what that's used for, that proper use for this. Now the one that I do recommend is this, and it goes by a lot of names, but it is that mesh type. It's almost like fibers that have been pressed together, and you can kind of see the fibers. And this is, I think originally it went by the brand name Bylene. And now I think all the manufacturers have a version of this. I think, and I've used several different brand names before. I've looked at them, I've tested them. In my opinion, they're all identical. I don't think I have ever seen one that differs from the one that I have. And I have not, this one is not Vilene. This was I think it was All Stitch that I got this from. Just go by the description that the manufacturer will give you. It's a mesh kind. I don't think there are others on the market, simply put. This is the only one there is. This method of creating this mesh kind of water soluble. So just go by the description, and if it's water soluble and it looks like an interfacing, I won't guarantee it, but I can almost guarantee it, unless there's something on the market I haven't heard about. They're all identical. They work the same. They're all very strong, and I recommend 2 layers of this for my lace. There is one I want to show you that looks like this, but it is not water soluble. I just want to point it out at this point because I want you to know how to tell the difference. Like I said before, this one has a fibrous looking construction. You can see fibers. There's no real pattern. If you looked at it really close, you might see little tiny holes in it, or what looks like little teeny tiny microscopic dimples. But with the naked eye, almost, it looks like just fibers pressed together. This one, and I don't know if you can see it. I'll do this. Maybe that'll help. You can almost see a waffle weave or a little stamp in it, almost like a waffle. This is not water soluble. This is a cutaway. It's a poly mesh stabilizer. And the reason I'm pointing it out right now is because I have heard and have read on the forums and around the web where people have stitched their lace only to find out that, oh, they made a mistake. That is not the mesh water soluble. This was poly mesh, which is not water soluble, so your lace is wasted. So I just want you to be able to tell the difference. If you have both at home, take a look at it and you'll see. And just get it and print it in your brain which one is not water soluble, and just try not to make that mistake, because that can be so disappointing to stitch a nice piece of lace only to find out you can't use it. So that is a poly mesh, not to be used for making lace. Okay, back to the mesh type of water soluble, which I said I recommend 2 layers for making lace. And I'll show you how to hoop that in a bit. Here is the tacky version of this, which I love. This version comes with a paper backing. It's identical, but they have put a tacky side on it, and they put a piece of paper to protect it. It's just like having a sticker. And you just peel off the paper, and the other side is very tacky. It's not like glue tacky, but it's tacky enough to hold your fabric down. This I would use when making the napkin corners, and there is a video on the website on how to do the cutaway napkin corners, and I show you how to hoop this. So take a look at that video if you're not sure. I just love it for that. And it's also what I use for the toddler, the petite boutique bodices. Anytime I'm appliquing to the water soluble stabilizer, where I'm sticking a piece of fabric down to water soluble, I will use this, because you want your fabric to stay down nice and tight, and it keeps it from puckering as the machine is stitching. But I do not use this to make lace, because this is a little pricier, and there's really no reason to have a tacky stabilizer when you're making lace. So there you have the rundown of the different types of water soluble, and we'll move on to the next step. I've said it before, but a clean hoop is not my friend. Since my hoops are not for show, I don't really care if they're not clean. because they are not my final product. So what I mean by that is brand new hoops are very slippery. They look beautiful, but they are so slippery that it's really hard to keep anything in place when you hoop your project. It just slips and slides, and you pull and you tug, and it slides right back out and gets loose in the hoop. So here's what I recommend. That stabilizer I showed you that has the tacky side, I have lots of strips left over from cutting pieces like this to fit my 4x4 hoop. And those strips, you can use it to wrap your hoop. However, what I have done with this one is when I hooped to make napkins or to make something that requires the tacky stabilizer, and like I mentioned before, I have a video that shows how to hoop the tacky stabilizer. Basically, you stretch it across and you press it down around your hoop. So after I'm done with my project, instead of peeling all this off, I just cut my project right out of the hoop and leave the leftover stabilizer stuck to my hoop for future hooping. And sometimes I'll do 2 or 3 layers of that. After that, then when I use this again, I'll go ahead and peel off the layers after that. But I don't mind leaving that on there because that is really helpful for traction. So here's what I do to hoop for lace. As I recommended earlier, 2 layers of the mesh type of stabilizer. I try to make my hoop nice and snug before I put the stabilizer in. I don't count on pulling and tugging to stretch my stabilizer and make it smooth. I try to make it smooth initially. I will be pulling on it, but I don't want to have to depend on that because it's better to get as close as you can before you start tugging. So I'll go ahead and hoop it. And because you have 2 layers, sometimes the inner layer will get a little bubble in it, or the back layer might look flat. So you want to be aware of that. Sometimes I'll pull that, or sometimes I just pull them together. But the objective is to get this so it's drum tight, drum taut. See how much flexibility there is? This is way too loose for lace. And here's the logic in making it tight. I've talked about making sure your lace stays in place, your design stays in place without shifting until the stitching is complete, because any kind of shifting can be detrimental to the quality of the finished product. Every stitch in that lace is there for a reason. The lace has to stay together when this is washed away. And if anything is in the wrong place, the likelihood of that lace staying together properly is very low. So I have just hooped my stabilizer. It's very loose. It looks all right, but it's not right yet. So instead of pulling from the top like this and trying to hold my inner hoop in place, I turn my hoop over and I pull from underneath. So you're actually bracing against your fingers and pulling with these thumb and forefinger on the stabilizer. You're pulling down and pushing on the hoop with the rest of your fingers. So you have a better grip, and it's just easier to keep that inner hoop from popping out when what you're trying to do is just stretch your stabilizer. You can hardly see it, but I can see it moving just a couple of hairs each time I pull. And I don't want to pull it all tight at one edge of the hoop. I want to go a little bit all around. Go to the opposite edge and repeat. You're holding your stabilizer and pushing with your fingers. You can barely see it, but you do see it moving. And you can only pull as hard as your stabilizer can stand. If you pull too hard, it will tear. So, but all is not lost. Just don't pull there anymore. And just be a little more gentle. A little at a time is best. Don't try to do it all in one pull. And then here, these hoops are for the multi-needle machines, so this thing is probably not on your hoop if you have the single needle, but I'm still able to do it. I'm just pulling down, and my outer hoop tends to pop a little bit. That's all right, just push it down. I can already feel that it feels hard to the touch. I might want to do this corner just a hair more. You can see it moving. It's not moving by inches, it's just a few hairs at a time. Push your hoop back together. You want to make sure your hoops are flush when you're done. Touch it. It should feel hard. There should not be any spring in it. Do it on the inside. It should feel nice and hard to the touch. You're not touching hard, but you're just tapping it gently. You should feel. If it gives at all, you need to get it tighter. Now it should stay in place because the stabilizer that's stuck to my hoop is going to keep it from sliding. If this were a brand new hoop, this would not be staying in place. If it was a clean hoop, it just would not stay in place, and I would have to secure it a different way. So you could, if you wanted to, put double-sided sticky tape on the inside all the way around. And so then if you do pull it tight, let's say you've done all this like I just showed you, you bring it around this way, you secure this against the tape on the inside. You might want to cut off some of this extra because you don't want it to be stitched down. And you just secure that to that double-sided sticky tape. And that's all right, but the sticky tape tends to lose its tack after a while, and it might come loose while it's stitching. I just found this to be really just something that occurred to me when I unhooped one of my projects, and I thought, I'm going to leave my sticky stabilizer stuck to my hoop. It works great. And not just for lace, it works great for hooping fabrics and whatever else you need to do. Now I'm ready to take it to the machine. Well, here's the finished embroidery still in the hoop. And notice there are no puckers in the stabilizer around the embroidery. That shows that it stayed in place, that the stabilizer stayed in place, and it was hooped properly. And just to show you, this is the back. Nice and neat, and it looks almost as good as the front. In fact, you'll want to be careful that you're actually using the front of your embroidery. There have been a couple of times when I've ironed the wrong side because it looks so good, and I'll show you about the ironing and all that in just a little bit, but that's what it should look like when you are done stitching. Then obviously you need to remove it from the hoop. You'll want to trim the excess, and I don't get too close because I don't want to take any chances of nicking my stitches. So I just get close enough. And then I'll show you how to rinse it. Alright, I have a bowl of warm water, and obviously we're doing this for the video. I would normally take this to the sink and run a gentle stream of warm water over it. And since I can't do that here, I will just show you in a bowl of water. But it's basically the same thing. you want to, in this particular design, and you'll notice that this mesh type of stabilizer, it dissolves almost immediately. But with this design, you'll want to be gentle because you don't want these stitches to get all distorted, the little open weave. And so you'll want to treat it gently with the stream of water, but you want to rinse enough of the stabilizer away so that there's no more of that goop left in the open areas, because otherwise it'll look kind of sparkly, like there's something stuck in there. It just won't look pretty. So rinse it well enough to remove the goop from the open spaces. But don't rinse too much because you don't want this particular lace to be soft necessarily, since it's something you're going to wear as a sandal. So this is, in case you hadn't recognized it yet, this is the barefoot sandal design that can be used as a barefoot sandal or turned into a necklace. So that looks pretty good to me. So once it's like this, ready to be patted dry or remove the excess water, take it to a towel, just lay it down on a couple of layers. This is folded in half. Just lay the piece down, dry my hands a little bit, and then fold the towel over it and gently press the excess moisture out of it. There we go. This is when you might find that there's still stabilizer stuck in there in the opened areas. This looks pretty good to me, so I won't have to rinse it again this time. And then I just lay it flat on a windowsill or on my ironing board somewhere, or just leave it on a dry new area of my towel that hasn't gotten wet yet. Just leave it like that until it's dry, or until it's almost dry. I prefer almost dry, but if you forget about it, don't worry. It's not a big deal. So you just leave it there and come back and I'll show you what to do next. All right, we are ready to iron. I want to show you what I do when I iron lace. I use 2 layers of wool felt, and this isn't pure wool. I get mine at Joann's Fabrics in the US. I think there's a blend of something else in here, but quite a bit of it is, the content is wool. For my purposes, it's just fine. I use 2 layers. Also, this is optional. I haven't always used a pressing cloth, but sometimes if you're not careful and your iron is really hot, and I recommend ironing with a very hot iron, you do need to be careful not to melt your embroidery thread. And I do use polyester embroidery thread for all of my projects because it's durable. You don't have to worry about it, the colors bleeding in the wash, if you use it on garments, for example. And I think it's just, the durability is just great. It lasts forever, I think. So I use the polyester embroidery thread, and then I also use it in the bobbin. I think I've mentioned that before. And these are the earrings you saw stitching in the machine. I had originally taken footage of the sandal embroidering, but it was hard to see it white against white, just like it's a little bit difficult here. So it wasn't my wisest choice to choose white for this project. So I have also stitched out the pink earrings so you could see these. And this is the small version of the dramatic earrings. Alright, so the pressing cloth protects the threads from melting. So you can use, I had a lot of lawn, which is that really thin cotton. It's almost whisper thin, very lightweight. It's like a handkerchief, delicate handkerchief type of fabric. It's perfect for pressing. it works great for me. There are pressing cloths that are sold as pressing cloths, but I have also used regular printing paper, the kind you use in your printers, your computer printers. I just put a piece of paper on top of it, and that protects it well enough. And it doesn't really scorch the paper unless you just leave the iron on too long. But it works really well too. So here's what I do. 2 layers of wool felt. And 1 layer is fine too, but I like the extra loftiness that the second layer will add. Turn your lace. As you can see, it looks perfectly fine. But I love the extra quality, the extra fine finish it gets when it's been ironed. So it looks great, but make sure, like I said before, that you know which one is the right side and the back. This is the back, I can tell, because you can see it's a little bit different, but just look at it carefully because I have made that mistake before and ironed the wrong side. So you place it face down, so the right side of the embroidery goes face down. We'll put the earrings aside for a second. And you put the pressing cloth over it. If this were a little damp, which I tend to do a lot because I want to rush the drying process, and it works great. If it's a little bit damp, or just for the heck of it, you can put the layer of lawn underneath on top of the wool because of the sticky stabilizer. The water soluble tends to be sticky when it's damp. And you don't want any of the fibers from the wool to stick to your project. So it's just a nice thing to do to put a barrier between the embroidery and the wool felt. So lay your lawn down, put your lace face down on that, and then cover it for pressing. And you want to press firmly. You don't want to smash it to death, but you do want to press firmly for a few seconds. This is why you need to protect those threads. I tend to iron for a little longer than you might be comfortable with, but the fabric will protect. There we go. And you can see, because of the wool felt, it's like it carves out a space underneath. So it allows you to press this flat without flattening the front of your embroidery. There's a finished pressed piece. So much nicer. It's just like putting the wax on the fine furniture you just finished. You polish it at the end and it just makes it such a fine piece. Okay, let's do the earrings. You can still see it as though it's been carved into the wool felt. I'm going to get a clean spot so the earrings can make their own impression. And the earrings are actually still a little bit damp. I often do this as soon as I blot the excess water off. I will just hurry up the drying process, and I will iron it, open it up, let it air out, evaporate, then iron it again. It just speeds up that drying process, and you're killing 2 birds with 1 stone doing this. And this iron, if you're wondering, it's a Panasonic cordless. This is kind of a backup iron because it doesn't get as hot as my regular Rowenta. So I'm using it now because it's better not to have a cord for this video. Less things to deal with in my little setup here. But it's a Panasonic cordless. It works great, but for my taste, in certain cases, it just doesn't get quite hot enough, so I use the other one for most projects. And here are the earrings. And if they're still too damp, I'll just leave them there. It's nice and warm and toasty, and They'll be dry in 10-15 minutes. But when you flip it over, you have this perfectly flat piece of lace. And one thing I want to mention about the rinsing process is, depending on what your project is, will determine how much rinsing you do. So if you're doing earrings, you don't want these to be soft. If you're doing the sandals, you don't want these to be too soft. You want it to hold its shape. If you're doing lace to put on garments, etc., then you'll want to rinse them, maybe even wash them in a little gentle soapy water and add a little bit of fabric softener to the rinse water, and you'll have to rinse them quite a bit longer to make sure they soften up. But for these projects, you don't want to rinse too much of the water soluble out, so that they'll be nice and stiff when they're done. And there's the ironing process that I love doing when I make lace. Even if it's angels, jewelry, whatever it is, I love to iron it to give it that final finishing extra special touch. Alright, here's a review of what we did. I have water soluble stabilizer stuck to my hoop for grip. I hoop 2 layers of the mesh type of stabilizer, and it is hoop drum taut in the hoop. It stays that way the entire time that it's stitching. You want it tight enough that it feels hard to the touch. When the embroidery is finished, you should not see puckers, because that is an indication that it slipped during stitching, and you don't want that. You might get away with it, but it's not. It shows it's not the highest quality embroidery. It's not meant to do that. So you want to avoid that. Once it's done stitching, you trim away the excess stabilizer, rinse it in warm water, and you can speed up the drying process by pressing it while it's still damp, or just wait till it's dry, or almost dry is the best time to press it. You put 2 layers of wool felt down, a layer of the lawn fabric or some other pressing cloth, face down, so the right side goes down against the cloth. Oh, see, I almost put it down this way. That's the wrong side. This is the right side, right here, face down. Just be cautious, you're not pressing the top side of your embroidery. Then, with a hot iron, and I usually put it on the hottest setting, I just press firmly, and for a few seconds, let it rest. Open it up, and it is ready to be decorated. Here are just a few examples of the designs you can find on our website. These are all done using that technique I just showed you. It's all freestanding lace. Here is the barefoot sandals and more design, and more is because it can be a barefoot sandal, or, and this is how it looks come out of the hoop and rinsed. And then you can add beads and make it into a necklace, which is the and more, or turn it into a barefoot sandal. And I do plan to make a video on that, on how to do that. Here are the earrings. These are the dramatic earrings. The longer ones, obviously. Here's the little bit shorter version of that. Here are some of the angels that I also have available. I have many Angel of Light designs for purchase. Just look under the Angel of Light in the left side of the website in the catalog, and all of these will come up. This one, if you would like to try freestanding lace but don't want to purchase anything at the moment, I do offer a couple of samples. I'll warn you though, once you try it, you're going to be hooked. This is the Angel of Light Cancer Awareness 2nd edition. And there's also another one without the cancer ribbon that's called Angel of Light 2nd edition. They're not identical. They're a little different. The skirts are a little different. Not just the ribbon, but the design is actually different. So you can try either of these for free. And I just love this little angel. I purposely made them this size so they can be slipped into a common envelope to send to someone. And then there's the other varieties, themes. These are Christmas angels. This one can be a winter angel. It's not a Christmas specific design. Here's the angel of Christmas with the tree. That's more Christmas. So like I said, these are a few examples of the beautiful designs that you can purchase from our website. And once again, this one is free of charge, along with the non-cancer one that's similar to this one. They're both free of charge. I hope you find something enjoyable on the website that you can use for freestanding lace. And at the very least, you ought to browse. I think you will be inspired to try some. See, I told you there was nothing to be afraid of. Ooh, our therapy session is up. I hope you now have the courage to try freestanding lace. My bill will be in the mail.